welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers. Hello, Brewer fans, and welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. My name's Craig, and joining me today is Scott. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Cyber Monday. May as well tape a podcast.
All right. Well, unfortunately, Vince and Chad weren't able to be with us this evening, but there's lots of action here going on in baseball as we're approaching the hot stove season. And today also, besides Cyber Monday, was also the baseball non-tender deadline. So we're going to talk about that coming up. But before we get started, the Brewers last week made one of the earliest trades of the offseason this year, and also a nice good old-fashioned trade with the San Diego Padres, so we're going to start off by talking about that. If your Brewer fans are not aware, the Brewers did trade Trent Grisham, their former first-round draft pick, who had a breakout season last year in the minor leagues and also contributed to the Brewers all the way into the playoffs. They included in the deal was Zach Davies, rotation member of the Brewers for a number of years, who was originally acquired from the, for Geraldo Parra, was it? They both got traded. And coming back to the Brewers is shortstop, second base prospect Luis Urias, and also left-handed starting pitcher Eric Lauer. So, I guess start off, Scott, I guess what's your initial take on the trade when you first heard of it?
Well, it was definitely interesting. I would be a lot more pumped about it if it happened a year or two ago, maybe, because Luis Urias was really highly touted the guy pretty much raked it in his entire minor league career and has just kind of stumbled in very limited duty in the majors. And so I think that he has the highest ceiling of any of these guys. So that's definitely a plus. But it definitely leads to some questions like, where's he going to play? Because right now, Arcia is playing short. I assume that's where we're going to try to play Urias. But Castanheira has second base pretty much locked down, I would think. But you never know with Stearns.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, did it bother you at all to have to give up Grisham in order to get Urias? And also, go ahead and comment on what your thoughts are on just the other part of the swap, because it almost seemed like two swaps in one, but the pitcher for a pitcher, Zach Davies, who has 2 years of arbitration control left, for Eric Lauer, who I believe has 5 years of team control left, and is also a left-handed pitcher.
Yeah, I think that the best player in this trade is Urias, and so I think – obviously you got to give up something to get something. And Davies, while he had a breakout year last year and looked amazing in the first half of the year, kind of fell back down to earth and was just slightly above average by the end of the year. Trent Grisham never really was like the highly touted Brewers prospect, but he did a great job last year in the majors. So kind of the exact opposite of what Urias is doing right now, I guess. But I think, and then as far as like Eric Lauer, like, I don't know. I don't really have high hopes for him being like a fairly successful above average major leaguer, but you never know. I guess like you said, we have 5 years of control of him to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with most of your takes on the trade, Scott. I was pretty excited for the trade, and I think it was pretty much a consensus around baseball that the Brewers won this trade, so to speak. And, of course, we'll never really know who wins the trade depending on how these players perform in the future. But as far as his current value, I think that the Brewers did really well on selling high on Trent Grisham. Just a year ago, last offseason, Trent Grisham had almost little to no value, even though he's a former first-round draft pick. He struggled with the first several years in the minor leagues in the lower levels. He finally made some adjustments last offseason, and it really paid off. And he obviously has good plate discipline, but the rest of his game is not anything particularly great. he did add a little bit of power last year, but I think San Diego really bought into his improvements last year, and hopefully he does go on to be a solid major leaguer. But to me, he's always been kind of even with his breakout, still more of a fourth outfielder type, or possibly even platoon as a left-hander. But I wasn't too sad to see him go. I think I was smart to sell high on him. And it's kind of doing the opposite, buying low on Luis Urias. I mean, this is a guy who obviously he wasn't originally drafted, but signed out of Mexico as a very young player. And many years in the minor leagues, he excelled. I mean, he was the MVP, I think, of the high A a few years back, and he also was an all-star at AA, and he led the league in on-base percentage. I mean, the kid also just can absolutely rake. He's hit over 300 at almost every level of the minor leagues. He does have somewhat limited power and speed, but he does have a great batting eye, just like Grisham. So he really, besides being able to hit, I think he also knows how to get on base. So that's a huge asset as a middle infielder, I think. And where I say we're buying low, it's because even last year at AAA, I think he had 19 homers, so he even started to show a little bit of power. But of course, with the juice ball at AAA and everything, I can take those numbers with a grain of salt. I do believe he maybe has like 10 home run power and 10 stolen base type production at the major league level. But I really feel that he could be a 300 hitter with a near 400 on base percentage at his peak, and that's a pretty valuable middle infielder at the major league level. There's some risk, of course, and he had a cup of coffee in 2018 and hit too well, but it was just a September call-up. And last year he got, I think, 230 at-bats or something like that. And his numbers were actually pretty similar to Grisham's were at the major league level, where he hit about 230 something with a pretty decent on-base percentage, about 100 points higher than his batting average. So I don't know. I thought he showed signs, and obviously there's some adjustments to be made to major league pitching. It's a pretty big jump from AAA to major league, as everyone knows. So I think he'll make those adjustments and really flourish as a Brewer, especially going from a hitting environment at Petco Park in San Diego, which of course you and I have been, Scott. Great ballpark.
Great park.
But it's not really conducive to hitters like Miller Park is. So I think that that's going to have a effect on his numbers going forward too. But where I like the trade the best is the fact that this is a position of need for the Brewers, middle infielder. I mean, Orlando Arcia was just re-signed to a 1-year, $2.2 million contract by the Brewers, but I think that they feel that they're going to have to move on from him at some point this year, possibly the off season, possibly before the end of the year. And I think they envision Luis Urias as their future shortstop if indeed Castanheira is locked in at second base. So there's also some talk with Castanheira's troubles at second base defensively that he could get moved, so that gives him even more depth, in the middle infield. So I really like that part of the trade. What are your overall thoughts on some of that, Scott?
Well, I definitely agree that we're selling high on Davies and Grisham, and that we're buying very low on Urias. But I guess there's two ways to look at it. Like, if you just look at it in a vacuum, like who got the most value, I would say most people would agree that it's definitely the Brewers. I mean, that's the way it looks right now, just because we have a lot of young talent there. And I guess the other way to look at it really, though, is kind of like you said. I mean, for the Brewers, I wouldn't say these are giving up areas where we have like just an overflow or overwhelming amount of talent. I mean, who knows? I mean, we probably need like 3 starting pitchers right now at the time of this taping anyway. So not exactly an area of a ton of talent, but for the Padres, kind of the same thing. Like, they kind of had their middle infield. They had that pretty much figured out. And Davies is going to he's definitely probably a better fit. I guess most pitchers are, but a better fit at Petco. So I think he will be successful anyway. But yeah, overall, it's just it's a good trade. It doesn't necessarily fill a lot of the holes and the needs that we have, but it's a good start to this offseason.
Yeah, and I was a little sad to actually lose Zach Davies, just because I have a soft spot for him, being kind of a undersized, not only short, but kind of short, small in stature type of guy. out there on the mound where, your typical pitcher that's good drafted is like 6'5", 230 and has like 100-mile-an-hour fastball or whatever. Davies is kind of the opposite of that. So, and he had success with it. And I think he proved a lot of his doubters wrong throughout his minor league career. And, he came over to the Brewers and was a member of the rotation for a number of years and helped a couple of playoff teams. And kind of had to see it like that go, but kind of where the Padres were at and why they were interested in probably acquiring him is because of the fact that, they have a whole glut of pitchers that just came up from the AAA level. Some of them with very levels of success. Like Chris Paddock was a Rookie of the Year candidate last year for them, and they also have a few other guys coming up from the minor leagues in the next year. So, I think that they wanted a veteran to add to the rotation. I think that they're wanting to compete. Obviously, they signed May Machado last off season and Eric Hosmer a couple seasons ago. And so I really feel like that they're going from having a great farm and transitioning that into a contending team. And I think that they more so needed a veteran, even though he has less control than they needed another just kind of number 5-ish type starter with team control. And so I think that just the Brewers on the opposite end of that, I think, they moved on from Chase Anderson. Now they moved on from Davies, these mediocre veterans that are, 4th or 5th type starters. I think why not take a chance on a younger guy with more team control, give him a little bit of time to see if he can figure it out and become something. And the Brewers are also adept at, if they're failing the rotation, to possibly make something out of them on a bullpen, as they very much value their bullpen more than a lot of other Major League Baseball teams. So, with all that being said, I think I really like that move of just, I would have done that deal possibly straight up Davies for Lauer, even though I will admit that, the Padres, it makes more sense for the Padres at this time. So overall, though, I think it's fairly even trade, but definitely I think I'm more excited for the Brewers end of it, and I don't think that's just looking through rose-colored glasses as a Brewer fan either. I think really the Brewers, there's a consensus that they're going to end up having the better end of this deal in the long run.
Yeah, time will tell, but yeah, definitely. I hope it's not obviously the first or the last trade, I guess, that we're going to end up pulling off. But I don't know that there's a lot of trade chips that the Brewers have, and if we do have them, I don't necessarily want to part with them. I mean, when you think about trade chips, I mean, as far as like surplus value for what they're getting paid, Keston here and Josh Hader are probably at the top of that list, and I don't necessarily want to part with either of them. Although it was rumored today that that we're listening to talks now to see what people are going to offer up for Josh Hader. I don't think he's going anywhere. I just think it's something we threw out there.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, Scott, and that was definitely something shocking you saw today as you read. And whoa, Josh Hader is being made available, I think is what has been reported by Ken Rosenthal. And that's kind of shocking, but my take on it is he's probably not going anywhere at this time. If someone comes and blows the Brewers away with an awesome offer, I could definitely see something happening. But I really think it's just gauging the market, because I think by doing so, you kind of get, once you get some offers coming in, you'll know what teams are interested. You know what type of players are willing to offer. And if the Brewers, God forbid, aren't contending come the middle of July, they can return to these teams that are in contention and that, reached out to you during the last offseason and return to them and be like, okay, well, are you still interested in Josh Hader? We'll make him available, but now we want more, or we want those same players you offered before. And so kind of just gauge the market for them, in advance. I think that's kind of all that they were doing. But, of course, being a small market team, it kind of reminds me of the A's type move, where as soon as obviously it was already reported that Josh Hader will be arbitration eligible for the first time this year, which is basically the first time he'll be making some real money. And we're only talking about like $4 to $5 million here in his first year of arbitration, but he will get increasingly expensive each year for the next 4 years of control. And so this is usually a time when the Oakland A's trade a player when he's going like the second or third year of arbitration, possibly even before their first year, and swap them off for players with further out, team control, and it really allows them to keep a low payroll while still having talent in their system. So it wasn't surprising that the Brewers, follow a similar path, I guess. But I'm hoping it's more of a hybrid of that, where we can still add some really necessary veterans to the playoff type team, but also, trade players when it makes sense. And I think there is some fear probably in the organization that if Hader were to have any type of down season, or even worse, like an injury or something like that, especially a season-ending one, having Josh Hader and not getting any value in return for him would be really detrimental to a small market team like the Brewers. So I think at some point they'll have to cash in on him. Obviously, you want to maybe be it with those last year of control or something like that, which would be 3 years from now. But you never know how he's going to perform over the next couple of years either, or if he'll stay healthy. So I think you always have to keep your options open. If someone comes in and really wants them, to kind of be that final piece to make the World Series or whatnot. And Josh Hader's answer to that, say like the Dodgers, they come with an offer that you can't resist, you might have to take it. That's just the realities of being a small market team in today's baseball.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard truth, but what are you going to do? I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, you look at like how bad the Padres have been almost historically, and you just think like, I mean, it's not obviously the biggest market in the world, but like, how do you not attract more free agents to build a great team in San Diego? You have a team like Milwaukee where, I mean, nothing against Milwaukeeans and whatnot, but it's not exactly like the number one place that people are looking to settle down and hang out, especially if you're, Major League Baseball player. Yeah, I know. It's, well,
I did not know this.
Some people said, but then again, I mean, where's the number one spot if you're like a younger guy like that? Probably Miami. And so, I mean, they're losing 100 games a year too, so who knows? But
yeah,
I guess we should probably get into speaking of like players that have left Milwaukee. I guess that's where I was kind of going with that. I was trying to do a clever segue. Kind of dropped the ball a little bit.
Now to the non-tender list.
No, I was going to go to the free agent list first. As far as people that have walked away so far from Milwaukee.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then maybe we'll go to non-tender, if that's cool.
Okay, yeah. Good segue, Scott.
So we already talked about how we lost Grandal to the White Sox for, I don't know, an awful lot of money. I can't remember how much off the top of my head, but it was significantly more dollars and years than the Brewers were probably willing to commit to him. And then let's see, who else have we lost recently?
Drew Pomeranz 4-year deal with the Padres.
Yeah, they paid a ton too. Oh yeah, that's where I was going with that. Yeah, San Diego versus Milwaukee. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that was rough. And then we just lost Moustakas too. That one we lose within the division too, which is I guess double upsetting.
Yeah, Mike Moustakas, who last 2 off seasons was a free agent, had to sign 1-year deals with the Royals and then the Brewers respectively in the last 2 seasons. And after being a free agent, and now he landed a 4-year, $64 million contract with the Cincinnati Reds, which was shocking. And they plan on playing on the second base, which I thought was pretty surprising. So the Brewers kind of showcased them for the division rivals to sign them, and also to the light of both Moustakas, of course, now, and his agent Scott Boras. They finally cashed in on his great season with the Brewers last year, and wow, unbelievable contract he got. And I heard someone online comment something about that the Boras Moustakas situation from the last couple of years was like Boras kept falling, like had an 11-pitch at bat, and he finished off with hitting a triple through the gap or something like that. So anyway, unbelievable contract he did get it. But I'm happy for Moustakas. He was a kind of a fan favorite of mine, and a lot of Brewer fans, everyone who doesn't love yelling Moose toward the field. And yes, he's going to be sad to see him go. But he's gone. And so the Brewers this offseason have lost more talent to the free agent pool than any other team so far, and by far. So it's a little bit alarming. It means we're going to be coming back on some payroll a little bit most likely, or have some opened up to maybe sign some upcoming free agents. But with that being said, we didn't necessarily decide to tender contracts for very many players that were arbitration eligible either.
Yeah, no, that is very true. We are apparently we are judging talent and saying that if you're not worth what you what your what the numbers
Arbitration
say that you are,
salary above, yeah.
yeah, whatever your RB number is, like you're just not going to get paid. Like simple as that. Because we really cut a lot of people loose. This is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and so that list, of course, included Travis Shaw, who had a horrific season last year. He was non-tender. It also included, very surprisingly, Alex Claudio, and also, even more surprising to me and shocking, Jimmy Nelson. Also included Tyler Salandino and Junior Guerra, which we kind of knew about ahead of time. Not shocked by those last two, obviously, but the first three, especially Nelson, are shocking to me. What's your overall take on this, Scott, when you heard the news today?
5 people non-tendered. I just thought that was crazy. Like I can't remember the last time any team is non-tendered that many people, I guess. But
we were the only team that non-tendered that many this year.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. And I guess, I mean, so what you have to do when you're doing this, right, is you have to say, if this guy is performing at what he did last year, and you think he's going to perform right around there, is he worth the amount of money that was his projected salary? And if he's not, then you just say no. So apparently that's what we're doing. But so looking at it, Junior Guerra was supposed to make about $3.5 million. Jimmy Nelson about 3.7. Tyler Saladino about $1 million. Travis Shaw about 4.7 million, and Alex Claudio about 2.2. Claudio is actually the most shocking of all of them. Not only because I didn't think he had that bad of a year last year, but also because how much we gave up to get him originally in the first place.
Yeah, and we did give up a supplemental first-round pick, the number 39 overall pick from a couple drafts ago, last season's draft. And, we got one season on Claudia, fairly mediocre production. I think he did make like 83 appearances or something like that, so it's not like we didn't use him. But I don't know. I guess I'll give Stearns credit because he is someone who will kind of move on from a mistake that he maybe made and not, let his ego get in the way. Most other GMs might be like, well, this was my guy last year. I'm going to stick with him, and we'll offer him our contract. And, hopefully he comes through the way I thought he would this year. And, so most GMs would do that. So I think he's just being smart about it. Also really just keeping his options open. And also one thing to keep in mind for Brewer fans is that it's very possible that one or two of these 5 guys could still come back to the Brewers. It would just be that other teams could bid on them at this point, obviously. The Brewers also could, it's just like, but they weren't willing to pay what they would have won in arbitration. And so, you added up all those salaries, that comes to about $14-15 million for those 5 guys, Scott. So I think my guess is we're going to bring one or maybe even 2 of those guys back. I'm hoping kind of Nelson, just because of how unsettled our rotation is at this current time, I guess I'd say. And just, the way that Nelson went out with injury and unfortunate time after his breakout season, you just want to see him kind of have success as a Brewer again, and not within our team. So I don't think his career is anywhere near over or anything like that. And so that's why I really hope the Brewers find a way to find a number that matches Nelson, and they can bring him back maybe for like $2 million or so this year. But we'll see, because, if other teams are interested, they can jump in and offer more. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and when you think about it, $15 million, you could have that's as much as we used to like sign Moustakas last year, and then I guess, and still have $5 million to spare. So that's definitely part of it. I hate to say it, but a lot of these guys were, based on what they did last year, quite replaceable. So, it is what it is. The only other thing that I guess is when you mentioned that people, like for example, Jimmy Nelson, hopefully could come back, maybe even give you could maybe even sign these guys, for less. But what winds up typically happening and not always, but typically, first of all, the agent is going to go with whoever is going to pay you the most money. That typically makes sense. But then also, there is a level of, I guess, animosity or just feeling like kind of jaded when you are non-tendered, because you basically feel like the team is saying that they don't want you. That's not really the case. It's just that they don't want you for $4.7 million or whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be able to bring a couple of these guys back at a slightly reduced rate. But I can't necessarily argue with non-tendering any of them. If there was one that you were going to keep at the numbers that we would say, or that we kind of just tossed out there, which one would you really want kept? But it has to be at the money. Like, who would you have tendered, I guess, if you had to tender one of these five?
I would say Jimmy Nelson, just because I believe he could come back and be, if he shows any bit of health, he could be like a number 3 type starter, and he would totally recoup his value going forward then. So 3 point whatever million he was projected, I thought was enough of a gamble for sure. What would be your take on that same question, Scott, or answer to that same question?
I know it sounds crazy, but I think Alex Claudio has a little bit more value to the Brewers than to other teams, because the guy's just got a rubber arm, and he could just give you an inning or two seemingly just about every day. So that is definitely something that's pretty valuable, I think, especially when you consider that the Brewers tend to go to their bullpen in like the 5th, 6th inning almost all the time. So with that being said, I mean, he's only projected to get $2.2 million. We're not breaking the bank with him. Like, I think that he still had some value there.
I wonder if baseball's new rules that are going to be starting in 2020, where relievers that start the innings have to pitch at least to 2 batters, factored in, because Claudio did have a lot of outings where he only faced 1 or 2 batters, kind of like a Lugia or whatever the right-handed version of that is. And so maybe that factored into, decreasing his value a little bit too. So maybe it's not all his fault. It's kind of just like that rule change, maybe like baseball. The Brewers maybe foresaw that they'd have to use them less going forward, and therefore it wouldn't be as valuable.
Yeah, that definitely could have been part of it. I mean, I guess I was just thinking, like, to have a guy like that, I mean, because, yeah, he can only give you, like, a batter or 2, but he seemed to be able to also be able to go out and give you an inning if need be. It's just that when we had times like that where we kept him out there, they weren't his more successful outings, I guess. And so that probably had a lot to do with it. But, I mean, you're looking at a team right now that's still as of this broadcast, they have holes at third, first, starting pitching, relieving, catcher. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So
we have massive holes all over the roster, Scott, which makes us not protecting like for the Rule 5 draft. Someone like Zach Brown a little more surprising now, because we have so many 40-man spots open. But with that being said, I don't know if they knew. I guess the reports are the Brewers were trying to tender Travis Shaw a contract even today, but they couldn't agree on one. They had to end up not tendering him, but they weren't willing to risk it going to arbitration. So now, last podcast I did mention there was a player on another team, the Diamondbacks. I was hoping got non-tendered and they could, be on the Brewers' radar. That was Jake Lamb, a very similar player to Travis Shaw. Now, I think that's kind of telling that the Diamondbacks, how they view and value Jake Lamb as opposed to how the Brewers value Travis Shaw after his season last year. It's because the Diamondbacks offered him a contract, and Shaw didn't get offered a contract. And if you look at the team's area of need, I mean, the Brewers have no one at first and third as we speak, so they definitely had a huge need there. And the Diamondbacks are the opposite of that, where they've got Eduardo Escobar locked in at third, and breakout player Christian Walker from last year locked in at first. They really have nowhere to even play Lamb, and they still offer him a contract to platoon, most likely at first base and third base. So, I mean, that really tells you how much other teams probably won't be clamoring after Shaw necessarily. So the Brewers maybe have a shot at re-signing him at a reasonable rate, but they also could very well lose him. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. I guess we'll see how it all works out. But yeah, I mean, I'm still just trying to get over it. Like 5 guys of our 40. Like, nope, sorry.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and this is a team that made the playoffs last year. I mean, I could see this as a team. This is the type of thing that a team should do when, they did not meet expectations. Like, I'm sorry, but this is something the Cubs should probably be doing. I don't think they had that many players eligible for arbitration. But, I mean, overall, it just seems shocking a team that kind of, in my opinion, overachieved a little bit without, after Knebel went down, and especially after Yelich went down, they still ended up making the playoffs in September, and then the Brewers are kind of so much, cleaning house, so to speak. And some of this is involuntary cleaning house. When you talk about 3 huge key members of that playoff team last year were Grandal, Moustakas, and Pomeranz. I mean, I would have to argue that there are probably 3 of the 5 most key players on the Brewers to make the playoffs, and they're all gone now. And so that's alarming to me. It's hard for me to, we'll see what happens. It's going to be exciting offseason. I feel like there's so many moves that are going to be made, but I really feel that Stearns has taken chance on guys that weren't great performers last year. But there's some speculation on how much payroll the Brewers have cleared that maybe they will go after a top-end guy and maybe even be competitive, make competitive offers to guys like Anthony Rendon. I don't know if that's in the cards, but maybe if nothing else that comes out of all this payroll clearing is maybe an extension to Christian Yelich. That would be an awesome news and welcome one for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody in Milwaukee would be excited to hear something like that. But yeah, like you said, I think we're almost like $60 million in payroll, less than we were last year, just from unfortunately losing a lot of people to free agency. But I guess some other. Well, here, before we wrap this up, we can at least look at some of the other notables who were non-tendered, just to kind of throw those names out and see. Either we'll bring them up just because it's notable, it's kind of shocking that they got non-tendered, or it's a household name, or maybe it's somebody that's on the Brewers' radar that we can maybe take a look at.
Yeah. Well, you probably have a list there, Scott, but from the starting pitching end of it, I'll throw out 3 names of guys that did get non-tendered that would be available that were former high upside players that have kind of taken a downturn in their careers, but I think are still young enough to turn around and provide some really nice value. And that is Aaron Sanchez, formerly of the Astros, Blue Jays and Astros here recently. And then, of course, Taijuan Walker from the Diamondbacks coming back from injury. They had to non-tender him. And then Kevin Gausman from the formerly Orioles, and then, of course, traded the Braves last year. I think I would, he really would fit in, either that or a guy like our own Jimmy Nelson. Out of those 4 guys who had shown some success in the past, still fairly young, the Brewers, I feel, really could either take a chance at a couple of guys like that to plug in the back of rotation or anywhere in the rotation for that matter, and try to make a go of it going forward.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I hate to say it, but I don't really have like a great list. I kind of just have like a thread where people are just kind of throwing names in and as it happened. And so there's not like a great list or anything like that. Like, well, you'll probably think this is terrible, but I thought Jesse Hahn showed some potential as potentially being like a good pitcher at one point. He was non-tendered, but I wouldn't say that's exactly notable. Former Brewer Domingo Santana, after his 253 average 21 home run campaign, he was non-tendered by the Seattle Mariners. That's kind of interesting. Not Brewers interesting, I don't think.
Well, I think that's another notch to put on Stearns' belt, so to speak. I mean, because he traded him for Ben Gamel, and I think a lot of Brewer fans were upset at the time that we didn't get enough value for Santana. Well, Gamble was a huge member for our team last year, contributor, and he's still on the Brewers going forward. And now Santana's a free agent. So.
Yeah, the Cubs finally parted ways with Addison Russell, which would have been a really noble move if they would have done it about a year ago.
Yeah.
Kevin Pillar was kind of surprised. But I think it has more to do with the fact that he was going to get almost $10 million. So the Giants got rid of him. Again, I don't think there's really any need for the Brewers to look or anything like that with that, but just some notable names out there. I think that's just about all I have, though, that from what I see here.
Yeah, I will have to say, going through the rest of the offseason, the number one position on the Brewers that worries me the most that we won't be able to add a quality player, and that'd probably be catcher, because unless first of all, there's just not that many out there to begin with, but through the current free agent list and even the non-tender list of catchers is pretty uninspiring, so to speak. And, to go from losing Grandal and what we're going to replace him with, if it's going to be a free agent, it's going to be kind of underwhelming. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, it seems like the only way we'll be able to obtain anybody like that would be kind of via trade. But, yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It seems like it's going to be impossible to get the kind of production that we got from Grandal, even if there was some kind of, crazy platoon like B.J. Surhoff, Bill Schroeder, probably the best catching platoon the Brewers have ever had. No, I mean, there's no way to do that. So, unfortunately, I mean, that just means we're going to have to get that value somewhere else. And hopefully it's at first or third. But there, too, I mean, are you really going to be able to find a way to replace what Moustakas did for us last year at third? Pretty tall order. First base, now, if you were talking about Aguirre and things from 2 years ago, that would be really tough. But last year, I think we can find some people that can that are going to be able to do that and then some. So we're going to hopefully gain a couple wins by getting some better talent at first. But we'll see what happens. And actually, you brought this up, and I forgot to circle back to it. Do you think that there is any chance that the Brewers say, fine, RC is at short, Urias at second, and Keston here is going to play first?
Is it possible? I think if indeed their plan is to play all three of them in the starting lineup, I'd almost be more likely. I think we'd see Urias at third base, even though he doesn't have a lot of experience there. He can definitely handle that. RC is still at short. Hira's still at second. But, I mean, I just think that you should leave here at second base. I mean, even though he's got some shortcomings, he's still young enough to turn that around a little bit. And his bat really plays well at second base as opposed to he's a first baseman. I mean, bat basically will play anywhere, but I'd rather get some other offense at the corner infield spots, especially first base from free agent market. And it would not shock me. I just have this gut feeling that the Brewers are going to be bringing back as part of first or third base platoon or whatever. I have a feeling they're going to be bringing back either Thames or Shaw on a cheaper contract. I don't know which one will be, but I just have a feeling that those, not a lot of other teams are going to probably offer those guys under 40-man roster spots at a salary they're looking for, most likely, but we'll see. So I'm hoping that one of those guys comes back to the Brewers, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely possible. And actually, when you think about it, I was actually thinking that when we made this this trade, I actually thought that there was a very legitimate chance that Arcia had basically had his last day in a Brewer uniform, but they did decide to tender him. And I'm a little surprised that they tendered him over some of the people that we non-tendered, but, like you don't want to do. I mean, Arcia is 2 years removed from having a really great campaign. And so, maybe it's just one of those where we weren't willing to sell low on him.
Yeah. Oh, and just also they didn't just offer Orlando Arcia a contract. They actually agreed on a contract. So he's coming back to the Brewers at $2.2 million. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean he'll play another pitch with the Brewers. I mean, he could be traded or something, but they've actually agreed to the contract, so there won't be an arbitration process for him or anything like that. They've actually agreed to terms already. So, and that's what they were trying to do with Shaw today. And since they didn't get it done, they didn't want to risk it because they can't afford to go into arbitration and lose to Shaw, or at least they don't want to. So, I think that they're still maybe going to work out. I mean, in the next couple of days, he could, agree to something. But I think by opening up to all their teams, his agent and him would be stupid and not see what else is out there if the Brewers, that they can't beat the Brewers. Because that's what it basically just comes down to all the money. I mean, when you're going to look for a job offer, you're going to take the most money no matter where it is, unless you really, really love Milwaukee, which we all do. But money talks. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I forget what it was, like 2.2, 2.3 that they agreed to him with, but I mean, if he doesn't come to that agreement, maybe he's the sixth person that may non-tender. I mean, it's a crazy world we live in, I guess.
Yeah, never know. But so I don't know. The process is very fluid. There's some anxiety with that, but there's also some excitement going into the hot season. I think the Brewers might even try to make a splash with a pretty key free agent. I think there's going to be at least one really big signing the Brewers do. I don't know where it'll be, but we'll see. My guess is that we're going to go cheaper out on a catcher in the corner infield and maybe make a splash with a starting pitcher, but we shall see.
Well, it's very possible that we are going to, depending on what happens anyway, but I'm not sure if we'll do a taping right away next week. It probably depends on what shakes down. I know the baseball winter meetings are the 8th through the 12th, so we might have to wait until the 12th or the 13th to give you a taping. But if something happens sooner, we'll probably break in with like a quick podcast then just to kind of break it down. But hopefully it's a very, very busy next 10 days for the Brewers.
Absolutely. Should be exciting. Looking forward to it.
All right. You want to wrap this one up?
All right. Stay classy, Wisconsin. And go Brewers.
Stay classy. Go Brewers. Dun-dun-dun-dun.